the show. Now, we're going to talk about the makeup of the government, of the cabinet in this hour, because I don't think that it is wrong to note that of the top 5 positions in the cabinet, not one of them is held by a white man. Now, 10 years ago, that would have been unthinkable almost, wouldn't it? And yet today we've got a female Prime Minister. We have a Home Secretary whose family originate from East Africa. We have a Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, who's also from an ethnic minority background. We have a Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, whose family originate from Gambia. And there's plenty of other people who are non-white and plenty of other women in the cabinet. In fact, I think I'm right in saying that there are more women in this cabinet than there ever have been in any other. I think there are 10 women. Now, you could still say that that's not representative because there are 30 different ministers in the cabinet. I think 21 full members and 8 or 9 attending cabinet. So it's still only 33%, but that is the most that I think there's ever been. And there are other non-white faces around that cabinet table. Now, I think that is something to comment on, and I would comment on it in a very, very positive way, because I think David Cameron can, if he's having a gin and tonic at home tonight, can sit back and think, well, that wouldn't have happened without my leadership. And he would be right, because he made every effort to encourage more women and more people from diverse backgrounds to come into Parliament. And if you look at most of the people that I've just mentioned, they all came into Parliament in the 2010 intake, so 4 or 5 years after David Cameron got the leadership. So I think there's a lot of credit that is due to him. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're a Conservative voter or not. Surely that is something that the whole country ought to be able to welcome. The fact that we don't have a parliament anymore that is just full of the same type of people who are not representative of the country at large. Now, you're never going to get a cabinet that is totally representative of the country. Somebody's just corrected me. Kwasi is from Ghana, not Gambia. Apologies. And I'm not sure you should even aim for a totally representative parliament or cabinet. It's almost impossible to get. There are no gay people, as far as I know, in the cabinet. There is a distinct lack of people from state school backgrounds in the cabinet. 23, I think, out of the 30 or 31 are educated privately. Only 8 in state schools. Now, I think that is worth commenting on as well. So I'm not sitting here saying that the Conservative Party has got everything right, or even in Liz Truss has got everything right. But I think generally this is what I would call progress. But my colleague Natasha Devon, who you can listen to on Saturday evenings on LBC, she tweeted this afternoon. Is it just me who finds it kind of annoying the way people keep describing the cabinet as diverse? Because none of the top 4 jobs are held by white men. Reinforce the idea that the default human is a white man and anything other than that diverges from that. With me at the back, she says. Well, I'm not with her on that. I replied to her saying, God, you get annoyed very easily then, is all I can say. Imagine how annoyed you'd be if it was 4 white men. And Natasha then said, maybe not explaining myself well here. The issue isn't the ethnic makeup of the cabinet. It's describing people as diverse when what you actually mean is not white. Well, I'm still not sure what her point is on that. She says, I'm just trying to get people to use the term properly. Diverse means lots of people from a range of different communities and backgrounds, not black and brown people. Well, okay, but I'm still not sure that I'm with her on that. I think when you have a change, and this is a change from the norm in inverted commas, it is worth commenting on. And I don't see any reason not to comment on the fact that Labour haven't had a single female leader yet. They have lots of people from, and I will use the term, diverse backgrounds in their shadow cabinet, and indeed they have a good percentage of ethnic minority MPs. And I celebrate that. What I don't understand is why people on the left cannot bring themselves to say, yes, it's a really good thing that the Conservative Party has people from all sorts of different backgrounds at the top of the party. That should be welcomed by everyone, shouldn't it? 0345 6060 973. Albie Amankona joins me, political commentator and co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism for Equality. Am I missing something here, Albie?
No, I don't think you're missing anything at all, Iain. I'm not really sure what your colleague Natasha is talking about. I mean, you would absolutely describe the top team that Liz Truss has put together as diverse, at least from racial background and arguably from their schooling background, at least in the top 4 jobs. Liz Truss, I think, is one of the first prime ministers to have gone to a non-selective, non-church state school, which is a feat in itself. So I think it is a notable moment for Britain, but I think it feels remarkably normal, doesn't it, Iain? It doesn't seem to be this big Obama moment like we saw when Obama was elected, whenever it was, in the 2000s. And I think that is probably something to behold.
I'm just trying to go back a few years and think of a sort of 12, 15-year-old Albie. Now, if you had at that point seen a cabinet like the one we've got today, not really caring as a 15-year-old what they're saying, but just the fact that, oh my God, there's someone that looks like me as Home Secretary or Foreign Secretary or Chancellor. I mean, that I would have thought would have a really positive effect as role models on young, non-white people growing up in this country today.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't even need to go back 10 to 15 years. When I was at university, I saw Bir Mathalami, who was just in the studio with you just now, speak at an event. And it was at that point that I decided one day I wanted to go into politics. Seeing someone that looks like you in a position of power that gives you something to aspire to is a really powerful thing. And I know that because I have seen it myself. And I feel proud that we live in a country where the children today can look up to this cabinet and think, do you know what? I could do that one day if I wanted to.
You see, I remember back in 1987 when, for the first time, black MPs were elected. Well, actually, it wasn't for the first time, because there was, and I know this because I've written about him in my book, in 1832, there was a mixed-race MP elected called John Stewart, who bizarrely happened to be a slave owner. I mean, let's not go into all of that. And there had been, over the years, one or two, I think in the 1890s, there was a Liberal MP who was Indian. Can't remember his name now. But in 1987, there were 4 black Labour MPs elected. Diane Abbott, who of course was just here, Bernie Grant, Paul Boateng and Keith Vaz. Now, again, for lots of people at that time, they may have thought, well, there'll never be a black MP. And since then, and that's only 30 or 40 years ago, things have moved on a lot. And I don't understand why the left celebrate somebody being elected from a different background in their party, and they can't bring themselves to actually say something positive about it when it happens in the Conservative Party. Because in a sense, over the years, it's probably been more difficult in the Conservative Party.
Yes, I think that is a very good point. Look, ultimately, unfortunately, as with many things, I think a lot of it is clouded by party political glasses, and people will just look at something through that lens of, well, that's left-wing and that's right-wing, and racism or anti-racism or whatever you want to call it, it's not a matter of left and right, it's a matter of right and wrong. And actually, we shouldn't just sit back and say, oh, this is actually job done now, we've got the majority of people in great offices of state are from diverse backgrounds. Now we've got to see how this government will be judged on its actions. And personally, one of the things that I would like to see is a commitment from this government to implement the Inclusive Britain strategy, which Liz Truss herself, as Minister for Women and Equalities, had a key role in. And of course, Kemi Badenoch launched that earlier on this year.
Albie, thank you very much. Stay there, because I want you to hear what our next guest is going to say. Maurice McLeod joins us, Chief Executive of the Race on the Agenda think tank. He's a Labour councillor in South London, and he's written today an article for The Voice, which is headlined, "Real Change is More Than the Colour of Cabinet." Maurice, very good evening. Thank you for joining us. What do you think about the fact that we're actually spending this hour commenting on the fact that this cabinet is more diverse, in inverted commas, than any other in history? I think it would be odd if we didn't comment on that, don't you?
Good evening. Yeah, absolutely. Strangely, I agree with most of what you just said. I think it is something worth noting. To think that the big offices of state in Britain, not one white man holds one of those posts, that's something worth noting that and I think it's a positive thing. Now, whether
if you look at the position of Chancellor, we've had 3 in a row, haven't we? Which, I mean, I hope that very soon we'll actually even stop having these conversations, because we won't need to.
Absolutely, in the same way that we're still saying, Liz Truss is the 3rd female Prime Minister, I imagine we'll soon stop saying that. And, with familiarity, it opens gates to everyone, and we can all believe that we can be whatever we can be, which is a wonderful thing. So you were saying that people on the left aren't celebrating this. I can't say I'm celebrating the policies. I can't say I'm celebrating what these people might do. But the very fact that the country now has a different idea of what it looks like to be a politician, that's brilliant. Of course I celebrate that.
Now, your article's headline, Real Change is More Than the Colour of the Cabinet, which clearly it is. You're getting lots, I can hear you're getting lots of emails from people saying, oh, you're on the radio. Do you mean, well, just take us through what you're talking about in the article. Is it about background and class and education as well?
I suppose what I was trying to explain was why there might not be quite the huge celebrations that someone might think. If you said, wow, we're going to have what we've been calling for, basically, representation, we're going to have a cabinet that's made up of Asian men and women and black men and women, and that's a really good thing. If you said that, you'd think there'd be celebrations, but I feel that they'll be slightly muted because of what is likely to happen. It's what policies are likely to be brought forward. We don't want representation just for the sake of it. You want it hopefully because someone who shares your experiences and has a similar idea of what those solutions might be comes to power. Now, unfortunately, the majority, well, for the Conservatives anyway, the majority of black and Asian people still don't have conservative views. I'm not one of these people that thinks that there shouldn't be black and Asian Tories. I'm in the Labour Party, so I think everyone should. I don't think anyone should vote Tory, and I think black and Asian people have every bit as much right to be wrong as everybody else. So
that's an interesting way of putting it. But is it frustrating for you as a devout Labour member that optics are important in politics, aren't they? And the optics here, and Liz Truss obviously alluded to it in PMQs. She was asked about it by Theresa May. Well, it's 3-0 to the Tories. But there are people on social media saying, oh, no, it isn't. It's actually 1-0 because Theresa May didn't outright win an election and Liz Truss hasn't fought an election. So it's really only one. I'm thinking, oh, is that the desperation of an argument really here? But more has got to be done in the Labour Party, hasn't it?
In a word, yes. Let's be honest. We still remember that Labour still has the majority of black and Asian MPs are still Labour MPs. I think it's 41 compared to 22. But it's really worth noting that out of those 22 Tory black and Asian MPs, a quarter of them were in the running to be leader. And that doesn't count other really senior figures. So that's really remarkable. If you take political views out of it, which obviously you can't do because we're talking about politics, but if you took them out of it, your route to success seems much faster in the Conservative Party than it does in Labour. That's something that my party we need to look at how we treat our black and Asian representatives, definitely.
Well, great to have you on. Thank you very much indeed. That's Maurice McLeod. You can read his article in The Voice. He's Chief Executive of the Race on the Agenda think tank. Very quickly, Albie, what did you make of what Maurice was saying? There's quite a lot of agreement, really.
There was quite a lot of agreement, but I actually would take the politics out of it. If this was an achievement that Labour had achieved, I would not sit here and say, oh, well, because they don't agree with me, it's any less significant. We do need to take the politics out of these issues and just celebrate a win when a win happens. And I think, actually, now we've got to think about what is next. Do we still put so much currency on characteristics like someone's race? Do we look more deeply at things like class, things like what maybe people studied at university, maybe looking at STEM subjects, people that didn't go to university at all? Do we need to move on from this now?
Interesting text here from someone who says, I'm on the left and I love that Kwasi is Chancellor of the Exchequer, the first Asian Chancellor with Rishi and now Kwasi. Actually, the first one was Sajid Javid. How quickly we forget, don't we? So even though I may not agree with policies, I can appreciate the Conservatives and how they've given kids everywhere something to aspire to. Whether it's Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, Conservative, it's all progress. I'm black British, by the way. Well, and so say all of us, I think, to that. We'll come to your calls in a moment. Albie, Amankona, thank you very much for joining us. It's 19 minutes past 9.
This is LBC.